Hello, I'm Hari Berzins, and I'm going to share with you a presentation I call Radical Money. So just a second, I'm going to pull up my screen and share the presentation. Okay, so hello, I'm Hari Berzins, and I am here today to share with you what I call radical money. And we're going to nourish the roots of what you already have to grow a debt-free life that sustains happiness. So why radical? Well, first I looked at the definition. It's especially change or action relating to or affecting the fundamental nature of something in its far-reaching or thorough. It's also relating to the roots of something when we talk about math. I like that word radical because it means we're changing everything. For me, we went from living in a urban environment to a rural environment, living in a 1,500 square foot house to 168 square feet. And that experience changed my outlook on everything. Because when we start with the roots, we ensure a strong foundation. So we redesign our lives and think about what matters. What do I want to grow my life from? From what part of me do I need to stand the tallest? So I want to share a little video through our tiny house lifestyle and experience. We had quite a fun run of media exposure, and my favorite was this Nikon commercial we got to make. So I'll go ahead and show that.
It's just life. It's just compacted into a smaller space. I'm Hari, and I'm the mama and the picture taker.
And I'm Carl, and I'm the proud dad and husband.
And builder.
Hari and I were living in Central Florida, and we opened a restaurant.
We didn't know, but we were riding the wave of kind of an economic collapse. We had already thrown everything we had into the business, and that was it. It was just, we were done.
I took on 2 different jobs, wrote out the foreclosure of our home, and decided that we wanted to move to Virginia.
We're looking at redesigning our lives to rebuild without credit debt. And then we figured out that we could build a tiny house and get to the property as soon as possible and start living without a mortgage or rent.
The little house here is 8 feet wide and 21 feet long. We built it in about a year, and it cost us $12,000.
Well, every square inch of this space is valuable. I mean, we're trying to fit 4 people in a full life in 168 square feet. And the kids are getting bigger, they're taking up more and more space. It seems impossible, but we're making it work.
This little house enables us to build the larger house. We don't have any debt. We are able to spend the money that we make on materials.
You can make choices on how you want to spend your time.
And a lot of my time goes to building the larger house for us. I think it's our message really that you can overcome a lot of adversity, and we're able to document with the camera that these are the steps, and the steps will lead you somewhere.
Hopefully when people see a picture I share, they're going to think that it really is all possible. Building a house slowly is like driving versus flying. You know, if you drive, you know every hill. And it's a sense that you know where you are. And it's good to know where you are.
Where we are now is on our little 3-acre hillside in Southwest Virginia. We own everything outright without a mortgage. That was part of our plan. We lived in our tiny house for 4.25 years, and I don't add that quarter lightly. The last quarter was probably the hardest. Our kids doubled in size in that time, as I mentioned in the video, and things got more difficult as they neared their adolescent years. We moved into the big house in August of 2015, and it was in the nick of time. So I'm going to reflect a little here on the time in the tiny house. And in winter, and this is a view of the whole house. My body is squished up against the kitchen counter there. You can see the kids' feet just beyond the Christmas tree. We did decorate every Christmas, and the kids wouldn't have it any other way. You can see the shower there, the bathroom sink. Of course, in wintertime, we still spent a lot of time outside. So we had a big fire pit right next to the deck and lined it with giant rocks we found in the woods on our property. And getting outside means bundling up and leaving the tiny house and caring for the chickens, who definitely don't go outside in winter. They're great entertainment. They got us outside, and I admit I didn't really want to leave the tiny house on days like this, but I never regretted it. And so that advantage of being in a small space and being forced outside, because sometimes you need to get out, was a real blessing. I was always very grateful to be in touch with what it felt like outside, and definitely developed a deep relationship with the outdoors. We did everything you would do in a regular size house in our little kitchen. This is most of the counter space you're looking at here, making an apple pie. You can see in the sink I've got potatoes. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving, I believe, or Christmas in this picture. There I am making the pie. You can see that I've got a jar of kombucha brewing on the counter, a pumpkin ready to be baked. Our coffee pot, we used a pour over so that you didn't have to have the appliance on the counter. There's my device and all kinds of, I think, pickles there on the counter, leftovers from breakfast. So, tiny houses get messy, and this is the reality of what it looks like. But then there's always the flip side. There I am back outside to cool the pie off in the great outdoors and take a breath of fresh air. And always, grateful for those moments. So in the darkness of winter, Archer celebrates his birthday, and we have parties that just include our family because that's all we have the space for. But they're beautiful moments, and moments we won't forget, coming together and knowing that we are doing this hard thing. Because I'm going to tell you, living in a tiny house with a family of 4 is hard. There are beautiful moments, but there are hard moments. And so when we come together and celebrate the beautiful moments, that is what really helps us make it through the harder moments. And I'm from Florida, so winter is very hard for me, and I'm getting better at it with time. And what has really helped is, as in the video you saw, we lost our business, we lost our home, and so our tiny house was our response to that. We decided we are not going to do that again. We are going to, declare bankruptcy, foreclose on our house, and never use credit again. And we haven't since early 2008. We have been, on a cash-only basis. And so going through what many people would say would be their worst nightmare has helped me to find joy within myself and turn, and you find that light in the darkness. And so I love this quote by Albert Camus. And of course, in winter, seed catalogs help a lot. And so we dream up our garden, and then the daffodils poke out and the peach blossoms. And you can see in this photo that we have begun to build the bigger house up the hill. We lived in the tiny house for 1 year and watched the sun on the land and decided where the best place for the house would be, because you don't want to shade the garden. And our land is north sloping, so we're trying to make the most out of all the sun that we do have. And so that year was really helpful to place the house, and we're happy with where we placed it. One of my favorite things was planting seeds in January, and we used our shed to grow seedlings because there isn't any room in the tiny house. So we installed some shop lights and some shelves and a heater and grew our seedlings in the shed. And so the day when it's ready to put the onions out is an exciting day. And again, I'm out in the woods here, and I'm getting to know the trees and understand how, they're coming out at a certain time, and so am I, and I see my own connection to nature. And I really owe that to the tiny house, because with a larger house, you don't go outside as often. You just don't have to, and there's more to do inside, and so you're busied inside. So I'm grateful for those years where I really connected with those trees in the woods. And then we get to go out and start eating outside again in spring. Here are the kids when they were younger making spring rolls on the deck. And then summer is my favorite time of year. This is a peek in our southwestern Virginia home. And then we get to harvest garlic scapes. That's always a fun time to get the kids involved. And it signals, the start of the growing season. While I'm gardening, Carl's up the hill building the bigger house. So I like to say that what we've done here is build as we grow. I was nourishing the soil, building up the soil, learning how to grow food, while Carl's up the hill building the house. And it's easy for him to call me up to hold a board or, do any kind of assisting that might need to be done. And then I'll go back down the hill, harvest some food, and bring it into the tiny house to make dinner. These are new potatoes and broccoli that I grew, and I'm making dinner here. We also learned to grow our own meat, and this is our first experience with that. These are Cornish cross hens. And we did our own butchering. All of the homesteading that we do, we do right in a tiny house. But a lot of people wonder how you do that. What we do is use a shed and outbuilding, so everything cannot be contained in a tiny house. You do need, if you're going to do this type of work, you've got to have the large pots and the processing machines, and for canning, the jars and the containers that process the jars. So those all live in our shed or in a lean-to that is against the shed. I like this image because, we're always going to know where we came from. We do now live in this house Carl's building in this picture. We call it the big house, but just down the hill, the tiny house remains. And it's a great reminder every single day of the years that we spent there, the bonding we did as a family, and of what it did for us. It provided us a mortgage-free lifestyle. We now own 2 homes without a mortgage, and the tiny house is getting almost done being renovated to be an Airbnb. So we'll now get to meet people from all over the world, and it's going to earn us money. So back down at the tiny house, processing peaches from our peach tree. You can see Ella sitting there reading as we do it. So the kids that benefited tremendously from living in the little house. Technology was limited. TV viewing was not an option except for on their little TV that they could watch library DVDs. And so reading was a very big pastime for them, and it still is. And there's my garlic. In that image we saw in the beginning with this beautiful root system, this radical lifestyle change. I had never grown my own food, and I'm learning how to grow garlic. There's a funny story. I grew my first garlic upside down. I put the little sprout the way I thought it should go, which was upside down. And in spring, all my friends' garlic was coming up, and I was wondering, what's going on with my garlic? Well, eventually it finally came up. And then when I harvested it, I learned what happened. The stem grew like this great hook, so I could cure it just by hanging it on the fence. Of course, it didn't get very big, and that wasn't the way to do it, but that's how we learn. And so, you have to learn from all the mistakes, and the more mistakes you make, the more you're learning and the smarter you're getting. So remember that. So in this whole lifestyle change, I learned to build as many closed loop systems as I can, and that's a permaculture concept. And here is one of my favorites. So I grow the sunflowers for beauty and joy, and it's really fun and rewarding. And then I harvest them for the chickens. They love eating sunflower seeds. And then they provide us these delicious eggs with the most orange yolks you can imagine. And then they go to the bathroom on the wood chips that we get from across the street. A neighbor is a bowl turner, so he gives us shavings from his crafting, and we put that in the chicken coop. And then we take it out after a month and put it into the compost. And then once that compost, we feed that to the garden, and the chickens eat the kitchen scraps. And so it's this whole cycle of what I like to say is my life is feeding itself, and we want to look for as many of those opportunities as possible. So now we've made it through winter and spring and summer, and now fall comes. This is a view from just down the road. I like to get out and look at how the seasons impact the land around us, and then reflect on how that feels inside. And it's time to come in. The leaves are falling. You know, we're reconciling with what the year has brought, and we're going to bring it back inside, and going back up into the woods and witnessing the change in the trees, and accepting that all these leaves are going to fall, and that those experiences of the year are going to compost and then grow something new next year. And then there's the garlic. In October, just before the ground freezes, I put the garlic back in the ground, and it comes up the next spring. And now I put it in the right way. So I want to show you how we make this work, the logistics of living in our tiny house. So the first thing is you come in the door, and this is our foyer. We built a bench, and it opens up and holds all the family shoes. It's not the best way to store shoes if you care about how your shoes look. You know, they get muddied by one another, but it worked for us. I did keep a couple pair of dress shoes in the loft so that they wouldn't get muddied. But here is everyone's shoes. I pulled them all out and lined them up so you can see what we actually used. So this is the couch bench that is open here. So you can see we built it with 2 hinges. I would do that differently. I would make drawers, and we built our house in 2010. So tiny houses have come a long way since then. This was our own creation, and we realized that the lids were heavy for the kids to open. And so drawers would be a smarter idea, but they worked for us. Over time, I made some cushions that went against the back, so it really felt more like a couch. And that vinyl type covering was some fabric we had left over from our restaurant, so we used it. It didn't last long, and we changed. I had to recover those cushions in about a year. It only lasted. So I don't recommend using a vinyl covered fabric. But inside the couches, we kept craft items. You can see the iron there. There were also board games. And on the other side of the door from the shoe bench, we have hooks on the wall. And I put a basket up on the top to hold blankets. And then there was about an inch where I kept our birding books. So as I said in the video, every square inch was important. There's the kids' backpacks. I intentionally use this picture. It's not a pretty picture because that's what it looked like. They come home from school and just hang their backpacks on the dining room chair and don't zip them up. And it was kind of a pet peeve of mine. I'd say, can you please just zip your backpacks? Because that makes a difference. You know, the 6 inches of them hanging out into the room really matter. On a snowy night, everybody's come in with their snow clothes and they're drying, hanging all over the dining room chairs and the various hooks that we have around. So please take note, hooks are valuable. Here's a picture of what it looked like when it's cleaned up. And you can also see how I changed the cushions there. Obviously, I'm not a professional upholsterer. You can see that the cushions got kind of wonky and squishy, but we did what worked for us. Here's the kids' loft. That's a cleaned up version of it as well. They love stuffed animals, which, we didn't want to deprive them of everything, so we let them buy stuffed animals when they wanted from the thrift store, and they ended up with hundreds of stuffed animals. The benefit of having stuffed animals be your favorite toy in this tiny house is that you can sleep on top of them, which is what they did. And then every morning you wake up to make coffee to a little pile of stuffed animals at the bottom of the loft. Here's another picture of the bathroom. You can see we also have a cat, and her cat food went just under the little tiniest sink known to man. And on the left of this picture is my feet. So you can see that I'm standing on the shower, and then there's the toilet. And we plumbed our toilet with conventional plumbing into our septic system, which worked just fine. We put an exhaust fan in the bathroom and a very big exhaust fan in the kitchen. So very important to think about exhausting the moisture out of a tiny house. In the bathroom over the window, we put a shelf with hooks underneath and kept all our bathroom toiletries in mason jars. That was helpful because you can see what you have, and I kind of like the look of mason jars. And this picture is showing my closet. One of the biggest challenges for 4 people in a tiny house is keeping wardrobes. You have 4 entire wardrobes. We did only keep them seasonally. I stored the out-of-season clothes in totes in the shed. So the top half where the red boxes are up are my clothing, and then the hanging bar we all shared. So a curtain worked nicely to hide that and not have to deal with a door opening there. And this cabinet was the first cabinet we used for Archer's clothing. It was not a great situation because it was hard to pull those drawers out. So Carl built a shelf that held those bins for his clothes, but as he got older, he needed more space. So we put his clothes under the couch in milk crates, and that worked better for him, except for that it was so heavy to open. So we had to help him open that. On top of this shelf are the library books. So that's where we always kept our library materials. And we had gotten rid of all of our books and CDs and everything, so that everything we read was borrowed from the library. This is Carl's clothing cabinet, and he had a tiny rod for his button-up shirts, and then a few shelves for the rest of his clothes. And this is Ella's. This is in the kitchen, right next to the kitchen sink. And then behind the door that's open is the bathroom. And then above it is the entry to the kids' loft. So this was a high traffic area, and it was a challenge getting ready for school while trying to make breakfast and use the bathroom with 4 people in the space. So lots of opportunities for deep breathing and reminding ourselves that this was a minor thing. Just above Ella's clothing cabinet is the pantry. And you can see I've got a picture of it closed and open. So these are all of our dry foods that we didn't, we wanted to close it behind the door because it looks cluttery with it open. So the doors were helpful for that. And then anything that looks nice, we put into jars and put them out on open shelves in the kitchen. This is morning just after making eggs. You can see we do the pour over coffee with that coffee pot in the back, using our cast iron skillets, our tea kettle for heating our coffee water. All of our spices and herbs are in mason jars, and cooking utensils hang just behind the apartment size range. Here's a view of our living room, dining room, foyer, office, whatever else we could call it. And 3,102.5 is my calculation for how many times we opened that table and chair set and closed it back up. And that was a kid job. I said, dinner's almost ready, please set up the tables. And so we had 2 of these IKEA tables and 2 chairs, and then the kids sat on the couch and the adults sat on the chairs. Here is a great storage solution, the ceiling. You can see we hung our pot rod that our pots are hanging from the ceiling, and then devised these little shelves to slide the instruments into. Both kids are musicians. Our son now has 3 guitars. In the tiny house, I think he had 2, and then Ella had 2 ukuleles. So you can see that we made it work. We lived this way for 4.25 years, and we saved every penny we could to build our bigger house. And so what I wanted to offer you today is also an opportunity to understand how we did this and start taking steps to make your own radical plan. So imagine you want to live tiny, you're thinking about it, or you wouldn't be here. And so really getting clear on the why behind that will help you to realize your dream. So the first step is committing to basic practices. So basic practices are just things you do every day that are going to help you when it gets tough. For me, my basic practices are gratitude. Every day I try to write at least 5 things I'm grateful for. And over time, I look back on those things and I've come to realize that the things I'm most grateful for don't cost anything. And so that is a great help when I'm trying not to spend money. And morning pages is a practice from Julia Cameron, and you get up about 30 minutes before you need to and write whatever comes out. And it's a great opportunity to process some of the things that, dreams that are trying to come out or struggles, and it helps you to identify them and do something about it. Your basic practice might be different. Mine are gratitude and morning pages. It could be exercise. It could be anything, but just something that you're going to do on a regular basis that helps you, that's healthy for you. Another one that I do is mindful breathing. And this is one of my favorites by Thich Nhat Hanh as a mantra that I say as I breathe in and out. Mindful breathing is helpful because you can do it anywhere, anytime. No one knows you're doing it. And it helps to calm the mind when it's not easy. My 4th basic practice is budgeting and money tracking. And it's something I do every single day. And when we were faced with everything we were faced with in 2008, losing the business and the home, and how are we going to own a home again? And oh my gosh, the first thing we did was start tracking our money. And from there, we were able to make informed decisions about what we were going to do with our money. I use ynab.com. It's a great resource for money tracking and budgeting tool. And then for our business, I use waveapps.com, and that's free. And so I encourage you to check those out. So the next thing we did, after we started tracking our money, is to really understand, what do we have to our name? How much money? And it was $300. That was it. So I encourage you to look at that number for yourself, honestly. How much money do you have to your name? And I mean, how much can you go buy wood with if you need to start building a house? And that's the starting line. From there, we needed to clarify our vision. Okay, here we are. We've just been working our butts off for a dream of a restaurant, and now we're sitting on the couch unemployed. Well, what are we going to do? Well, you don't want to just start without a vision, because then you're going to lead somewhere that you might not want to go. So we sat down and made a list of, what we want. So I encourage you to ask yourself, why do you want to live tiny? What's leading you there? We clarified our vision by making a list of things we wanted in our lives, and slowly started to realize that we didn't want to live in an urban environment. We wanted to raise our kids in a more rural environment, a place where we could grow our own food, be surrounded by people having a similar lifestyle. And so that helped us to start moving towards Virginia, because at the time we lived in Florida. This is a good exercise, and I put this here because this happened to us this last year. So the question is, what would you want to do if your mom who lives nearby suddenly needs 24-hour care? And then would your current lifestyle support that desire? So what happened is we did have to bring my mother-in-law, Ursula, home from the hospital and into hospice care. Now, we didn't have to. She had long-term care insurance, and so we could have found a facility for her to live her last days, but that was not what we wanted. We wanted to be the ones to care for her. And I was struck with incredible gratitude for the choices that we made 8 years ago to design this lifestyle, debt-free lifestyle, that we can live such a simple life and be able to do things like care for our mother full-time and give her a beautiful passing. So I encourage you to think about what, these things that we really want in life and what matters the most, and make decisions with those in mind. The next thing we did was try to envision where we wanted to live. And so this is a good activity. You vision your dream community and lifestyle. So make a list of what your ideal community and life would look like. And if you already live this life, then list what you already love about your community, and then add a column of what you want to cultivate more of. And, I say spend the next 3 minutes brainstorming. Spend as long as you need, but I encourage you to do this. Does your hometown look rural, urban, suburban? What does your neighborhood look like? What sustains the community that you dream of living? Is it agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, something else? What do you do on the weekends when you're not working? How do you make your living? How often do you work? Do you work from home? Do you have a home office? What do the people around you do with their time? Are there mountains? Is the sea nearby? Are there 4 seasons? Do you have neighbors? How much land is around you? Do you spend time working the land? What do your days look like, and how far are you from family? Of course, add as much as you want to this. The clearer you can get on what you want your life to look like, the better. And this is the time to do it. Okay, and then once you have this idea of your lifestyle, get a stack of magazines from your recycling center and rip out pictures that speak to you, and make a collage, and then hang it up somewhere so you can keep that vision active in your mind. Another step to clarifying your vision, now that you've got these things sort of brewing in there, come up with a statement, your overarching goal. Ours was to build a mortgage-free farmstead and eventually open a tiny house bed and breakfast. And we are almost done. So it's going to be time to create a new overarching goal. Our tiny house bed and breakfast will open this spring. So it's been quite a journey, and it's been 8 years. So just want you to remember that too. Give yourself time to see it through. So once you have your overarching goal, you can break your goal into small steps. And these I call your milestones. Number 1 to 20, and keep going if you need more. I say 5 minutes here. This can take you 5 days or 5 months. Take your time, but also try to just get it done. Add dates to your milestones and add them to your calendar. When you come across these dates, that's okay if you haven't reached the milestone, just move it, but it's going to keep them in your head and remind you that you are working toward a vision that you're holding. Then the third facet to this is celebrate. When you reach a milestone, do something about it. And I encourage you to plan ahead on your celebrations. Come up with a list, and you get extra points for inexpensive or free celebrations. Our celebrations could be doing a silly dance on the porch to celebrate finishing building the porch. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but to really mark it and be happy about it is important. Okay, and the fourth thing is to start now. Okay, what small step can you take right away? Okay, write that down. We started an herb garden, and these micro actions, we wanted to grow our own food, and we hadn't done that yet. So we just started an herb garden, and this is telling yourself, hey, it's happening. And as you start to build momentum, just as you're training for physical fitness, that, you know, every little bit adds to the momentum. The fifth step is to align your spending with your goals. Okay, so you know your overarching goal, you've got these milestones, you know kind of the lifestyle you're working toward. Now you need to look at your money. You know, where is your money going? You need to commit to tracking your money every single day with some sort of app. I encourage apps, but if you like to do with pencil and paper, you can do that too. Create categories for everything you buy and keep track of what you're doing with your money. The way we do it is we use a debit card for everything. And then I use online banking to record my transactions into YNAB each week. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget, by the way. And over time, you begin to see and understand how much you spend in each category, and that gives you the opportunity to reduce your spending. So here's the basic numbers to know. Of course, you need to know your income. And that seems straightforward, but if you're self-employed, that might be a harder number to know. Work on getting really clear on that. And then you need to know your basic expenses. Basic expenses are things that recur monthly: rent or mortgage, utilities, insurance, fuel. And then you want to know your variable expenses. And your knowledge in variable expenses will grow over time as you begin to track. You might have a category that you've been mindlessly spending on candy bars at the convenience store. And if you start to add those dollars up, you'll realize that, wow, I'm spending $20, $30 a month on snack foods. And hey, what if I just stop that one habit? So keep building your knowledge there. You don't have to know this right now. You will know by just starting. You're going to start tracking your money, and then you'll know. In a month or two, you'll have more knowledge than you do now. You need to know your bare minimum money needs. And so by that, I mean exactly how much money do you need to get by. That's an important number to know, and it will help you make decisions. For example, Carl was working full-time as a chef and building our bigger house, and living in the tiny house was getting harder, and you know, we're still years away from finishing the big house, and I really wanted him to not work anymore except for building the house. And because I knew exactly how much it took us to live each month, I was able to convince him that we could make it on my salary, and he did quit his job and spent full-time hours on building our bigger house. If I hadn't known that, it probably would have taken us a few more years to finish our house. Okay, then 7, you need to cut spending. So there's a couple ways to do that. Drastic measures. These are things like selling the house, selling the car, getting rid of the cell phone. You'll know what those are when you start tracking your money. A little drastic measure for us was we were spending $100 a month on storage for our restaurant equipment. And once we started tracking our money, just seeing that, of course we knew we were spending that money, but seeing it on our list of expenditures each month was a wake-up call. And in the next month we decided we're getting out of that. We took all of that stuff out, sold it, got rid of it, donated it, and then saved $100 a month on storage. The small measures, every little bit adds up. That could be, cutting the convenience store stops or not getting coffee. And I encourage you to make an impulse buy control sheet. That's also known as a manifestation log. Okay, that's a piece of paper you hang up on your refrigerator or somewhere where everybody in the family can see it. If you have the urge to buy something, put it on that sheet and put the date and wait for 30 days before you do anything about it. At the end of that 30 days, if it's still something that will improve your life and that will help you get closer to your goals, then go ahead and get it. But it's also called a manifestation log because you might find that waiting 30 days, something happens. Like the one that broke suddenly starts working again, which happened with the kids' TV in their loft. They had an old TV and we thought it was broken. We thought about getting them a new one, and then we didn't, and then it started working. You might find one at a thrift store, find one by the dumpster, somebody might give it to you. So waiting is always a great way to save money. So in wrap up, I want to remind you to go slow, breathe, and let your basic practices move you through your challenges. Examine every spending choice to be sure it's aligned with your goals. Let the money pile up so that you can spend it on the things that will build your dream. So the most money we ever saved was $25,000. It sounds like so much money, but by following this plan, we did it. And then we bought our land and we went back to almost zero. And we just kept with the plan and got about 15,000 more and put in our well and septic and driveway and just kept on going. So you don't have to have a whole $150,000 right up front to do what we've done. You do it a little at a time, and you're investing your time. As you're moving through these milestones, don't forget to celebrate. Keep track of every penny you spend. And at the end of the year, make it a goal to know exactly what you've spent in every category. And I'm going to leave you with a what does it take? Facing fears. This is a picture of us on the second story of the big house about to put the roof on. I'm terrified of heights. There's another fear, watching Carl up on that ladder, putting the siding or the sheathing on the big house. That's me standing in the tiny house, just praying that everything goes okay. Setting clear intentions, as I've showed you today. Learning the hard way. Plant your garlic upside down, you'll know for sure the right way to do it. Or put cold jars of tomatoes in boiling water because you're processing outside on a cool summer day, and you'll realize the jars will break and you won't do it again. Loving each other. We could have raised one pig, but we chose to raise two, so they had someone to love. And telling each other you love each other. No matter how or where, make sure you do that. Make use of what you find and what you have, and this is that resourcefulness. Kick the resourcefulness into gear. The pigs love apples. There's apple trees everywhere with apples just falling on the ground. So we go pick them up. The pigs are happy. There's another resourcefulness. We took down 2 barns, pulled all the nails, and turned them into a beautiful home. Don't forget to rest. It's hard work, but you can do it. And play. This is a zip line up in the woods that the kids love to play on. Working together, a lot of times you've got to have more than 2 hands to get the work done. Learn how to support each other and make it happen. If you are alone, you can find a community to work with you. And we've done that as well. This is our crop mob. We came together with 5 households, and we rotate each month who gets the crop mob. And so that means we work at that home for 3 hours on whatever crop or building project they have. And then we have a yummy meal and enjoy each other's company. This group of people also came forward when my mother-in-law was dying and helped sit with her and allowed us to realize our dream of caring for her in those final days. Good communication. When you are pushing yourself to do something radical and different, you need to be in good communication with yourself, with the people in your family, and those around you. And really, that starts with understanding why you're doing it in the first place. Only keep things that bring joy. That goes without saying. And this picture is one of my favorites because everything there brings me joy. Slow and steady wins the race. And at this point, I leave time for questions. Often we have questions about where, how we even got the money to do this. And well, when we closed the restaurant, Carl and I both went out and got 2 jobs. I waited tables at night at a gigantic restaurant in downtown Disney, and also taught public school during the day. And Carl got a job as a hospital cook and worked at night at Morton's Steakhouse. And of course, with the budgeting and money tracking we did, we just put everything extra into savings. The other questions about legality, you know, we did have a challenge with that because we did it so long ago. We, you know, kind of followed that, hey, get it licensed through the DMV and you'll be fine. But that was not the case. When we got our first inspection on the big house, the building inspector looked down at the tiny house and said, "What's that?" And Carl said, "Well, that's my homemade travel trailer." And he asked if it had been inspected by a third party. And we said no. And he said, "Well, I can't let you live in it." So that was about a week before Christmas. Needless to say, that was a stressful season. But we did talk with him and ask what, you know, solutions we could find to still live in it. And we were lucky. He worked with us, and we were able to find a structural engineer who would give us a third-party inspection and provide a letter that stated that our tiny house met the spirit of the statewide universal building code in Virginia. And we got a certificate of occupancy for our tiny house. So we are quite fortunate in that way. If there are other questions, I welcome them. You can contact me through tinyhousefamily.com on my contact page. That goes directly to my email, and I'll get back with you just as soon as I can. I wish you all the best, and go for it.